Until a few months ago, I had no idea that the first consumer supersonic airplane dates as back as the 1960s. That was an important moment of realization for me because I had always assumed that the technology goes forward, and if there was any mode of transportation faster than the current day airliners, it would still be operating today. So it was only natural I had taken it for granted that today's airplanes are the fastest and they are already pushing the speed boundaries of consumer air travel. But as it turns out, I was wrong. There was Concord. So, what exactly happened? Why is the fastest and the super advanced airplane of its time confined to a museum today, when it should actually be roaring above the clouds? This is Some Curious Guy, and I am here to tell you the story of Concord. Concord started off as a collaborated project between the French and the British governments, who thought it was a better idea to work together rather than against each other, as they were trying to achieve the same goal, which I'll talk about in a minute. The two countries weren't enemies, but they weren't great friends either, marking the Concord as the beginning of the new relationship. The two countries signed a treaty, and the project was aptly named Concord, which means harmony. So the goal was to build a supersonic passenger jet airliner that can set a new benchmark in the aviation industry. It would be the fastest any passenger has ever flown before. The supersonic transport was a hot thing back then because after Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier, there were many new supersonic jet fighters that came into existence, and to have supersonic planes in their fleet meant power. Naturally, it was a question of when rather than if there would be a passenger supersonic plane, and all the powerful nations wanted to build their own ones. And it was an effective decision by the British and the French to work in collaboration, and it worked wonders. The only competition Concord had was Boeing's swing-wing supersonic design, which never made it into production, and the Russia's Tupolev Tu-144, which was also a disaster. More on that in a bit. Concord 001 made its first flight in 1969. What's interesting is that many airline companies had already reserved their Concords, the earliest reservation being done as early as 1963. Such was the interest the industry had, and essentially, Concord had established her monopoly even before she had hit the market. But the rising fuel prices, followed by disastrous Tupolev Tu-144 crash, made the airlines decide otherwise. Though as many as 40 Concords were reserved, only 20 were ever built, of which only 14 made it into commercial aviation. British Airways and Air France owned 7 each. There was no question Concorde was the fastest and the most advanced passenger jet ever built at her time. She flew at twice the speed of sound, and she soared so high that the passengers could see the horizon curve. What's even more intriguing is that she took just 3.5 hours to travel from London to New York, which means she would take off at London at about 7 p.m. and touch down at New York at 5:30 p.m. Essentially, you leave London after sunset but reach New York before the sunset the very same day. No wonder she was nicknamed the Time Traveler. To put that into perspective, her speed is greater than the speed of rotation of the Earth itself. Coming back to the question 1, why did it all fail? All that engineering effort in an age of not so powerful computers available for design, all those countless hours engineers spent working and reworking the designs to produce this magnificent metal bird for nothing. Well, it boils down to basic economics. In a word, Concord wasn't profitable. Concord did not have a sustainable business model, at least at the time of its incarnation. Concord was built for speed and sheer power. Back in the 60s, there were no real concerns about the fuel prices, and it was pretty much abundant for all the engines that existed. And naturally, the four Rolls-Royce Mammoth jet engines were designed with not a lot of fuel efficiency in mind, making the Concorde one fuel-thirsty monster. By the time Concorde entered operation, fuel prices were soaring and price of operation started becoming more and more premium. Concorde was operated only by two airlines, British Airways and Air France. British Airways essentially got their fleet from the government at no price, as they were the only nationalized airlines around. They were rather forced to accept. Even with no capital, it wasn't smooth sailing for Concorde. Both the airlines struggled to fill up their planes as the ticket prices were too high even for the niche group of passengers who could afford Concorde. By the 90s, more and more fuel-efficient airplanes made it into the market, and Concorde simply was too pricey to operate. Adding to that was the Air France Flight 4590 crash, and that only made things bad. It was later found out in the investigation that there was a significant threat specific to Concorde tires, and the plane was grounded for almost a year. The services resumed just after 9/11 tragedy, but the passenger count was so low that the airlines just couldn't afford to operate Concorde. Other factors like environmental concerns of the ozone layer depletion and excessive maintenance costs also played a crucial role. And that was it, the inevitable end of an iconic journey. With her long landing gears, the iconic delta wing and the famous delta wing swirl, her elegance was nothing short of that of a silver white swan stretching her wings. Her sonic boom was unmistakable, so was her silhouette as she landed for the last time on 24th October 2003. Many refer to that day as the moment when aviation industry took a giant leap back. Maybe that's true. The cost to revive Concorde today is just humongous, and there doesn't seem to be any plan to build a new supersonic passenger plane anytime soon. Maybe that's something the market deemed unnecessary. The Concorde, once thought to make the 747 the queen of skies obsolete, now sits quietly at a museum as an exhibit. But it's not an exaggeration to say, if 747 was the queen, Concorde was the princess. To understand this business case, we need to look at the fundamental rule that drives innovation and the economy. Technology has to make profit. If it doesn't, it will soon go extinct. Concorde was a staggering example that proves in today's world, economy beats technology. That makes me wonder, what happens if we deny Elon Musk's new crazy idea to take people around in rockets? If SpaceX too suffers a similar defeat like Concorde, maybe the fundamental fault lies within us. Maybe following the trends of the market is not the first priority. Maybe we need a new take of making technology available to the masses. There hasn't been a single breakthrough in modes of transportation in decades. Until very recently, concepts like Hyperloop and rocket travel were realized. I heartfully hope SpaceX, Hyperloop and the Boring Company make an actual difference and change how we travel in a fundamental way. But at the end of the day, it's basically one man's vision, and the world needs more such people. More importantly, we need more companies which can realize new technologies that can survive and operate with robust business plans, unlike Concorde. Concorde was probably way ahead of her time. She wanted to give the world something the world didn't really need, or something the world wasn't ready for. Yet again, it's a lesson from the history that no matter how game-changing the technology is, if it's not presented to the world the way the world needs it, it's no different from a plane that stalled mid-air. It would have nowhere to go except down.